Chapter 8 is about note taking, and it's actually called Note Taking Ain't Not Taking. So, being a part of this program, you're going to have lots of lectures, and you might have to read the textbook on your own. And when you're doing so, there are some specific ways you can take notes to help you be successful. Here are the objectives for this chapter and the things that you should learn through this lecture. First off, let's talk about metacognition. Metacognition is thinking about your thinking, being aware of what you know about something, what you understand about something, and what you don't know or understand about something. It's called thinking about your thinking. So, in any given situation, if you're in a class, you should always be able to process, okay, what don't I understand about this information and what do I understand? If you already know something, do you have to write it down in your notes? No, not really, right? Because you already know it. If you kind of don't fully understand something or your understanding of the concept was different than how it's explained in the lecture, then yes, you should probably write it down. When we engage in reflection, we think about something or a concept on a deep level. We ask ourselves a series of questions and answer those questions on a personal level. That helps us reflect. When we reflect, we are able to internalize information. Whenever you are sitting in a class, it's important for you to internalize the information. Think about, how does this relate to my life? How does this relate to who I am? And how can I take this information I'm learning and apply it to the real world? There are 3 different methods of note taking that your textbook talks about. Now, I want to be clear that these aren't the only 3 ways to take notes. These are just the 3 methods the book discusses. One of them is very popular in K-12 schools, and that is the idea of Cornell Notes. Cornell Notes were created at Cornell University in 1997 by Walter Pock. And the reason he created Cornell Notes is because students were struggling. They didn't know how to take notes. They were getting to college and they weren't making it through their classes. And so he created this method to help introductory college students learn how to take notes during a lecture. It's a very systematic way of doing things with the chart and essential questions and a space for notes and a space for reflection. T notes were created in 1996 by Archie Davis and Elvis Clark. Oftentimes, students feel most comfortable using T notes in a math class, and that's because T notes really are just a T chart. So on one side of the T chart or the T notes, you could have the questions or the steps to completing a problem, and on the other side, you could actually have the problem worked out. So it's good for math because it's a real descriptive, a graphic way to see when you're struggling with how to complete a problem. Oh, this is how you do it. A mind map is a visual representation of organizing information. It's kind of like a bubble chart. If you remember that from elementary school, it's where you take one concept and you draw a line and you make connections between that concept and other things. Within a mind map, you can have a content map, which is like vocabulary, key content that needs to be remembered. And then you can also have a concept map. And these are very similar to content maps, but they relate things together based on a concept. So think of a content map as being vocabulary from a specific chapter, but a concept map is being the book as a whole. How does every single chapter within the book all relate to the subject? Lastly, here are some do's and don'ts of note taking. So I'm not going to, because you can read this and this chart is actually in your textbook. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll just hit some of the highlights. You're only going to be successful in college if you attend class and you hear all those lectures. It's a good idea when you're taking notes to only write on one side of the paper. Obviously, you don't want pen to bleed through. You've got to be able to read and understand the information you have there. It's a good idea to put page numbers on your notes, especially if they're not in a spiral. If they're in a spiral, that's a little bit easier, but still you might want to number them just in case the spiral comes apart. It's a good idea to put the course name, the professor's name, the date that you're taking the notes. Those are just some organizational pieces. You don't have to write down every single word the professor says. You want to break it up into short, telegraphic sentences so that you understand it. Your notes are for you, they are not for anybody else. You want to leave some blank spaces in case you need to fill in some other things later. Remember back to those CTDs and CTQs we talked about. You can use those to create questions about the information from your notes. You don't want to, if you're in a class with friends, sit near them, be distracted. You probably don't want to listen to music when you should be listening to a lecture. You don't want to ever record a lecture without a professor's permission. It's just common courtesy to know that, hey, we need to do what's respectful and not record somebody without them saying it's okay. Stop and think about it. Stop and think about what you're learning and see if it relates to you. Don't doodle. Now, doodling is a very interesting thing because some people like to draw as they're taking notes because they say, by doing this, I'm processing the information. If that works for you, then hopefully you can connect that drawing with the content. If not, then it's probably a distraction. So you can look over the other concepts as well, and hopefully all of you will have some good ideas of some ways to take good notes.